Work and Earn by Texas A&M University, Kingsville, Title V I-CARE Grant. This material is not intended to constitute any tax, investment, or legal advice. If you need investment, legal, tax advice, and/or credit counseling, please consult with a professional within those areas. These are all topics around employment in general, but today we'll be talking about basic information about employment, such as deciding whether to work while in school, payroll taxes and deductions, and unemployment insurance, interviewing and salary negotiation tips, hourly non-exempt positions and salaried exempt positions, and the differences between the two. Working 101. In this section, we'll talk about working while you're in school, different kinds of jobs, interview tips, how paychecks work, and how unemployment benefits work. For those of you who work, you may feel like your work sometimes affects your ability to do well in school. We will explore this situation and learn how to deal with it. Often, students don't get a choice about working while in high school. They have to work in order to get through. Research has shown that students who work between 1 to 15 hours per week are more likely to graduate than students who work more hours or who do not work at all, perhaps because they learn to manage their time more effectively. On the other hand, if you want to earn more money and potentially reduce your need for student loans or reduce the amount you borrow, then you could consider working more hours. But remember, you may also need to take fewer classes to accommodate your work schedule. Keep in mind that part-time enrollment will delay your graduation, postpone your ability to earn a higher income, and possibly impact your eligibility for some federal student aid. If you choose this route, you may find that taking classes during the summer can make up for some of the credits you were unable to earn the previous year. Or you may choose to work fewer hours and take a heavier class load, while possibly increasing the amount you borrow. By taking extra classes, you may be able to graduate and enter the workforce earlier. Keep in mind that the longer it takes to complete your program of study, the more you will pay in total, not only because tuition and fees tend to increase from year to year, but also in an indirect way because you may be giving up potential earnings while you're in school. If you decide to work while you are in school, your next decisions are about where you want to work, how many hours, and if you want a temporary or permanent job. Jobs come in many different types. While you're in school, you may qualify for work study as part of your financial aid, which allows you to work part-time in a department or office on your campus, or sometimes off campus. Schools may also hire part-time student employees who do not have work study. Working off campus while you're in school is another option. One potential drawback of an off-campus job is that your employer may not be as flexible or predictable about your schedule compared to an on-campus job. Another is that you may have to arrange transportation to get to your workplace. Part-time positions are often paid by the hour. Hourly jobs are also considered to be non-exempt, which means you're not exempt from earning overtime. In other words, if you work more than 40 hours per week as an hourly employee, you will earn overtime. These positions are often in customer service, clerical, or maintenance areas. Full-time jobs can be hourly or salaried. If you're a salaried employee, that means you're exempt from overtime laws. So you'll be paid the same amount per pay period regardless of how many hours you work. These are typically executive, administrative, professional, and sales employees. Finally, most jobs are classified as either permanent or temporary. A temporary job lasts only for a limited period of time and may be either part-time or full-time. A good example is retailers that hire extra employees during holidays or other busy times. A permanent position is one that is expected to continue without a specific ending date. Once you decide it's time to get a job, whether you are still in school, looking for your first full-time job, or thinking about changing jobs, it's time to put together a resume and brush up on your interview skills. Your resume should include a short personal profile, which describes how your qualifications match the job for which you are applying, a list of your accomplishments, using active verbs and emphasizing results, volunteer work and affiliations with clubs and service organizations, work history, including relevant internships, educational background, a statement of references, and wherever possible, quantify your accomplishments. Some examples include meeting 100% of your project goals on time and on budget, or developing a new process that reduced costs or improved customer satisfaction by a certain percentage. If you're applying for a job that requires an application instead of or in addition to a resume, you may need to know things like your supervisor's name and contact information for any previous jobs, your previous pay rates, and the address of the employer. Remember that your school's Career Center or Career Services is a great resource for more in-depth information about interviewing. But here are some quick tips. Depending on what kind of job you're interviewing for, some of the following may not apply, but it's always better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. Before the interview, rehearse. Sit down in your interview clothes and have a friend interview you on your resume. Especially for salaried positions, it's important to research the company and the job. Visit the company's website and use your favorite search engine to search for articles and press releases written about or by the organization. Also take time to familiarize yourself with the company's competition. Be prepared to respond to common questions. Interviewers often use a set of questions on the skills most jobs require. Here are some tips if you're asked to talk about a specific situation you've encountered in the past. Describe the situation or task, describe what action you took, and then discuss the results you achieved. For hourly positions, the hiring manager may ask questions about your availability and ability to get to work. Also be prepared to explain why you may have left previous positions. Have a few questions to ask the interviewer. You want to appear curious about the company and its prospects and interested in moving up the career ladder. You may also ask about things such as the training process, uniform requirements, and their policy on scheduling. For example, does the store or company expect employees to be available to cover unexpected shifts? Some guidelines for handling the interview and following up are: arrive at the interview at least 15 minutes ahead. This shows you're prepared and excited about getting the job. Be yourself and take your time when answering questions. Try not to sound like you rehearsed this. Make sure your body language shows a professional image. Make good eye contact and smile. Have a resume with you. It is always professional to have a resume ready to pass out at the interview. Ask for a business card so you will remember names and know where to email thank you notes. Inquire about a hire time. It's okay to ask the interviewer when they will make a hiring decision. Send a thank you note soon after the interview. It's okay to email these. If you haven't heard from the interviewer in more than a week, give them a call to check on the job status. Your first payday is finally here, but how do you get your money? Different employers issue paychecks on different schedules, which could be any of the pay periods listed here. You will be told when you're hired, how often you will be paid. You'll also need to decide how you will be paid. Direct deposit, meaning your employer transfers your paycheck directly to your checking or savings account, is a convenient way of getting your money. In fact, it's so convenient for both employers and workers that some employers may require you to use direct deposit, but your employer cannot require you to use a certain bank. Sometimes employers will print a paper check for your paycheck. In that case, you'll need to deposit it into your bank account. You can do this in person and often through an ATM. Some banks have apps that allow you to deposit a check electronically by taking a picture of the check and submitting it electronically. So you got a job, you did some math, and you thought you knew how much your paycheck would be. But you may be very surprised when you see the amount in your bank account or on your paycheck, and no one likes those sort of surprises. It's important to be aware of what kinds of things can be deducted or taken from your pay before you get that direct deposit or check. Here are a couple of important terms. Your gross pay is the amount you've earned before anything is subtracted from it. Your take-home pay is the amount of money you have after income and payroll taxes are withheld, and possibly after some charges for your share of the cost of employee benefits. When you start a job, the Human Resource Office will ask you to fill out a W-4 form, an IRS form that your employer uses to withhold the correct amount of federal income tax from your pay. You may want to consider completing a new form each year, especially if your personal or financial situation changes. Federal tax is based on income, so whether you accept a job in New York or Texas, what you pay in federal taxes is the same as long as your pay is the same. A state may have no income tax, a flat tax, meaning everyone pays at the same rate, or a progressive tax, meaning people who earn more pay at a higher rate. Some states, cities, or counties also have a separate tax. In addition, a portion of your pay is withheld each month to contribute to the Social Security and Medicare programs. Retirees receive benefits from these government-sponsored programs. In most states, your employer will also withhold funds for workers' compensation contributions. And your employer may deduct amounts to pay for employee benefits, such as insurance or contributions to retirement plans. Unemployment insurance programs provide benefits, payments, to eligible workers who become unemployed through no fault of their own and who meet certain other eligibility requirements. For example, you must have worked during a specified period of time, usually in the past 12 to 18 months, and you must have earned a minimum amount of wages. Each state has its own rules for determining if you qualify, how much you qualify for, and how long, so you should contact the state unemployment insurance agency in the state where you are located as soon as possible after becoming unemployed. Getting paid by the hour. If you have or are looking for a job that is paid by the hour, that is, a non-exempt employee, there are some important things to know. In this section, we will learn about some special rules that apply to hourly jobs, how benefits work, things to ask yourself in a prospective employer, and how internships and externships work. The government requires most employers to pay hourly workers a minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is currently set at $7.25 per hour. Some states or cities may require that workers are paid a higher wage than that, and some companies have committed to paying their hourly employees a starting wage that is higher than the law requires. In some cases, the state minimum wage is lower than the federal minimum wage, but in those cases, the employer still has to pay you the federal minimum wage. You may also have heard of something called a living wage. This is different from a minimum wage, which is set by law. A living wage is a term used to talk about the minimum amount of money an employee would need to be paid in order to cover for all of their basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, etc., in a particular city or area. Some companies have also committed to paying their employees a living wage, but just know that this is separate from a federal or state minimum wage. Some employers may pay their staff less if they can reasonably expect tips to make up the difference. If you're a waiter, waitress, bartender, or cleaning staff, you may receive an hourly wage that is less than the federal minimum wage, and you will also receive tips as part of your pay. Texas minimum wage for waiters or waitresses is around $2.13 per hour. However, Texas has a secondary standard that requires tipped employees to be paid at least $7.25 per hour. Your tips may go into a tip pool. All employees in the pool have to chip in a portion of their tips, which are then divided among a group of employees. Employees can't be required to share their tips with employees who don't usually receive their own tips, like dishwashers or cooks. Tips from a tip pool can't go to employers or, in some states, managers or supervisors. Your tips are taxable. You should report your tips to your employer on IRS Form 4070 every month, and then your employer is responsible for collecting and paying taxes. We mentioned earlier that if you're a non-exempt employee, you're not exempt from earning overtime. If you work more than 40 hours per week, you will earn overtime pay. Let's imagine that you have been hired as a non-exempt employee at a rate of $7.25 per hour. You've already worked 40 hours for this week, but your boss says, "Hey, can you pull another shift this weekend at time and a half?" You normally get paid a little less than $58 for an 8-hour shift. $7.25 multiplied by 8 hours is equivalent to $58. It's a little less than $58 because of taxes. Time and a half usually means you get paid the normal rate plus half, or 1.5 times the normal rate. In this case, you'd multiply 1.5 times the hourly rate of $7.25 to see that the overtime rate is approximately $10.88 per hour, so your extra weekend shift earns you a little less than $87. That's about $29 more than a regular weekday shift. Because company policies and state laws vary, overtime doesn't always necessarily mean time and a half, so check with your employer. Depending on the employer, the number of hours worked, and length of employment, hourly employees may be eligible for some benefits. Part-time hourly employees may be less likely to have benefits, but there are many employers, some well-known, who offer excellent benefits to these employees. So do your research. Some of the more common benefits that may be offered to part-time employees include health coverage, tuition assistance, paid time off, and even to life insurance and retirement plans.